I'm going to go this way so that you can't see.
We're live.
My husband walks in. Yay, we're live. It's so hard because the mirror image to figure out where to position my head.
I know. Hi. It's really strange. But you look lovely, as always.
Okay. Thank you. So do you. Hi, everyone. If you're arriving, hello.
Thank you. Brit's here. Brit's here. Hello, hello.
Please say hi.
Who else is with us today to talk about this book?
We're so excited to talk about this book.
Oh, man.
Yeah, we'll give people a moment to join.
My friend Nora Lynn says that she watches every Craft Talk book club. She can't always say hi in the chat for a tech reason, but it's her birthday today. So if you're here, Nora Lynn, happy birthday. We're really glad you're here.
Happy birthday.
Hey, hi, Carolyn. Yay.
Hey, Robin. Robin, I feel like you've made most of the book clubs too. Hi, Amanda. Hi, Carolyn. Good to see some familiar names in the chat. I can't see... we can't see who's here unless you comment. So say hello if you want to comment. Mm-hmm. Well, Nicole, should we open with our icebreaker questions?
Let's open with our icebreaker questions. We want to know if you have any planned getaways this summer. Mary, do you have any?
I do. So I'm going to Sarasota with some friends who I haven't seen since, the beginning of the pandemic, with 4 couples. We are going to, just get a beach house in a few weeks, and I'm really excited about it. How about you?
Oh, for a little weekend holiday next weekend at a little staycation resort in town, like an hour away up the coast. So we're going to have a couple of nights and some 3-course meals included and views of the beach. So I'm, a weekend like that just 2 days can make such a huge difference in unwinding. And I can't wait.
That sounds wonderful. Shelly is doing a paddling trip on the west coast of BC. Oh, awesome. Nice. Robin is leaving for Santa Barbara, rented a home for several weeks. Oh, Robin. I'm so jealous. That sounds wonderful. Lake House. Not sure.
Margaret's here. Yay.
Hey, Margaret. Also, Britt's also going to the beach. Oh, go ahead.
Family in Nova Scotia. That would be wonderful. A wonderful trip.
Croatia, Anna? Amazing. Anna, where are you currently? Where are you going to Croatia from? Okay, the next question we want to ask you is a favorite book you've read recently. Curious to get some book recommendations. What's a favorite book you've read recently? Nicole, what about you?
Saint X. I love that. I love this book.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been reading a lot of
it up. You told me it was one of your favorites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's right up there for novels for sure. How about you, Mary?
I'm currently reading Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which I love Taylor Jenkins Reid. Her novels are always really great page turners. So this came out on Tuesday, and I'm really enjoying it. Let's see. Nonfiction, The Sum of Us. I haven't read that. David Sedaris, The Best of Me. Haven't read that either. Valentine. I don't know Valentine. Actually, is Valentine a novel by Elizabeth? Let's see, what's her last name? I think I know that novel. Yes, by Elizabeth Wetmore. Yes, I have the same editor as her. And I've heard it's really good, but I haven't read it yet. Oh, Danish Shapiro's Inheritance. Yeah, also heard great things about that. Cool. Okay, last question. Just something positive. Yeah, me too. Last question, just something positive that's happened recently. What's something positive? Nicole?
Booking the holiday. Booking that. Just figuring that out, knowing we can count down to that, I think is mine.
That's a
How
great
about
one.
you?
We drove spontaneously to Oklahoma last weekend just to visit family, and it was really nice to see family and spend the day at the pool, and my son got to see his cousins, so that was a fun thing to happen recently. Amanda says COVID shots, yay. Anna says a new meditation habit. Oh, lovely. Robin went to dinner outside. School ended for the summer. Cool.
Yay.
Yeah, it is time. It is summertime, right? So, great. Okay, well, it's so good to have you all here. Before we dive into our discussion of Palm Beach, we are just briefly going to introduce ourselves in case, I think we know most of the people here, but if it's your first time either with us here or your first time watching this after the fact, we want you to know who we are. So Nicole and I started Craft Talk Book Club at the beginning of this year. January was our first month, and we felt we saw a need, we saw a gap in the book club world of a book club for writers to talk about craft choices that authors make in contemporary fiction and nonfiction, both. And so it sounded really fun to us because we both love to read and we love to talk about craft. So we kicked Craft Talk Book Club off in January. This is our fifth book. This is our fifth book because this was technically May's book. And each month we alternate between fiction and nonfiction. And so, yeah, and we meet here and just chat away. So let me just briefly tell you who Nicole is. Nicole Breit is an award-winning essayist, poet, and writing instructor based on Canada's Sunshine Coast. Her work is widely published in print and online journals, and her essay, An Atmospheric Pressure, was selected as a notable essay by the editors of Best American Essays 2017. She is the creator of Spark Your Story, a series of online programs for life writers that helps writers get experimental with structure and master the foundation of storycraft. Yeah, that's you, Nicole.
Thank you, Mary. That's me. And it's an honor and a delight to introduce you now. Mary Adkins is the author of the novels When You Read This, an indie next pick and best book of 2019 by Good Housekeeping, and Privilege, New York Post Best Book of the Week, and Today.com Best Read. Her books have been published in 13 countries, and her next novel, Palm Beach, will be published by HarperCollins this summer. Pre-orders are now available. And her essays and reporting have appeared in the New York Times, The Atlantic, Slate, and more. She teaches storytelling for the Moth Worldwide and creative writing both online and in her hometown of Nashville. And as we've been doing for the last several clubs, before we jump right into the book, we usually open with a quote. And so I have a quote here to get our conversation started from the book. It seems to me now that some truths will never be enough to seal the mysteries that precede them. It's lovely. And with that, I think I'll hand it over to you, Mary, to start our discussion.
Okay, so just to kick us off, what did you think of this book? General thoughts, please share in the chat. We want to hear just reactions to it in general. And Nicole and I will share our own.
Did you like it? Did you love it?
Yeah, did you like, love, dislike, hate? Why? What did you think?
Mary, I was wondering which character that quote was from.
Good question. Oh, it's Claire. It's okay. Claire near the very end of the book. The quote is from Claire. So Amanda loved it. Margaret says great. Wendy says rich. Britt liked it. Jen liked it. Elizabeth likes it so far. And yeah, Elizabeth notes, I love the varying point of views. That is something I also really appreciated about her writing, Alexis Schaitkin's writing. She she does some really cool stuff with point of view, and I think it's bold. I think she makes some quite bold choices. You know, having written from several points of view in my novels, all three of my novels, I know it can be, at least for me, it can be very challenging. And I think she made some choices that made it especially challenging, and she really nailed that challenge, I think. Okay, so just getting her wordsmithing is amazing. Interesting telling, liked it fine. Okay, what do people think of the title? Just to kind of warm us up here, because Nicole and I chatted about this book yesterday in preparation for today. And we were really enchanted by the title. Like we were, I mean, I actually had a lot of questions about the title, and then Nicole had some brilliance to say about the title, which I'm hoping she'll share with us in a second. But first, I want to hear what others have to say. Just reading, catching up on the chat here.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, Liz. The narration of a travel video. Mm-hmm.
Oh. Yeah, Britt says I was confused about the title at first. And I was as well, Britt. I didn't know, you know, some books I think have very clear titles. And with this one, I didn't really know how to connect it to the story. Britt says, but I liked it after reading the book and the author's comments at the end. Yeah, there's that author's note at the end about the creation of this fictitious Caribbean island. Yeah, I like this point, Elizabeth. I've been thinking about the title is the idea that it could be any Caribbean island. Well, I think, yeah, there's something about, you know, I'm stealing Nicole's insight here, but like X as we solve for X, right? Like X is the missing piece, that a variable that could potentially be any value in math. What else is X? Like, what is the symbolism of X in life, in the world? Yeah, I like that, Marianne. It reflected the tourists' ability to project whatever they thought onto the island.
Mm-hmm. That was one of the words that I used when we were talking, Mary, I think, was that it's a projection. Or an unknown.
X marks the spot. Oh, Amanda, that's good.
Yep. Canceled. Death.
These are great. Nicole, you had a couple of others. Would you mind sharing?
Yeah, I think in our conversation you said forbidden, and I was thinking like all of the associations with X there's a lot of danger, like poison, and even like X-rated. There's something about that too, but I was thinking about it a little bit more, and the sort of juxtaposition of saint and X as well. And I know that Saint something is how the names of a lot of these Caribbean islands, but there's also something about when somebody dies and how it's, you know, she's the beautiful daughter. She's the one that was innocent. She's the one who, you know, had something taken away from her life taken away from her. So those two things together felt kind of perfect, but you did have to get into the book and read it in order to sort of parse what this title might mean. And I also find that a little frustrating sometimes when I look at a book and I pick it up, I'm like, I have no idea what this is. I felt that a little bit with the vanishing half too, but then once you get into it and that meaning, the depth of meaning becomes apparent, and then I really appreciate how killer, like it's just a killer title. It's so much is encapsulated in something, in a title like that. Once you get into the story and you understand what it's about.
That's great. And I see a couple of other things in the chat that I don't think we had talked about, Nicole. So these are great insights. Like first, exo is like X symbolizing a kiss. And then Christina making that point about like sainthood, right? Like what if Saint X refers to a person or the idea of a person, what characters had an element of sainthood or like martyrdom? That's so good. And yeah, at this point, like Elizabeth noting what Marion said, people who, or someone, I think it was Marion, people who have been there couldn't even describe the shape of the island.
Mhm.
So that brings me to something else I would love to talk about, which is this fascinating omniscient point of view that she opens the novel with, right? So I just, the first sentence of the book, begin with an aerial view. Begin with an aerial view. It's a command, right? Who is that a command to, and what kind of command is it? Like, this isn't just an omniscient author. This is an omniscient narrator. Excuse me. This is an omniscient narrator who is instructing someone, the reader, like speaking to someone to describe how to view this place. Begin with an aerial view, slip beneath the clouds, come down a bit lower. On the next page, zoom in closer. What is the significance of that? Like, this is such a specific choice that she's making. And I think it's a really interesting conversation or thought process to go through to think about why she's doing that. Because she very easily could just be a typical omniscient narrator describing the island without these sort of almost like, what Susan says, video production, without these like cinematic directions that you would have in almost like notes for a camera person or in a screenplay or something. Like, why is she doing that? Why do you think I know we aren't her, so we don't know, but like, why might she be making that choice in this book?
Mm-hmm. It's almost like one way of thinking of it is she inviting us to land, like as a tourist onto this island as well, to sort of recreate the experience and bring us right in.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting because it's, in that sense, I feel like the kind of camera panning from above to me does feel similar to how I imagine being on a plane arriving on the island.
That's how I felt with that aerial view. Was like we're panning, we're coming in and we're panning in closer and closer, and we're trying to get like the full perspective so that we can start at the very beginning and try to understand what happened. In this book that is really trying to be a recreation of a mystery that never is really, no one ever really pieces together.
Yeah, like we are a tourist too. The reader is also a tourist. Documentaries that have been shot about the original crime, Robin says, nice. Jen says, it's like the narrator is trying to shape exactly the way we look at it, the way maybe a made-for-TV movie, or a documentary would force us to view something in a certain way. Amanda says, I think it's an attempt to put the narrator in charge and give us the impression we can trust the narrator. That's cool.
I love that.
Yeah. A call to keep our eyes open and see things from a variety of angles. I really like that, Wendy. Because it's sort of almost calling into question its own take, like Amanda's pointing out. It's like, there's, and I think we'll come back to this a lot, and I think she kind of does, like, this idea that to some people, and maybe even to the reader, Saint X isn't real. It's like a movie set, and they don't know the name of it. Like, it's just there as a sort of place to visit in the same way that you visit a television show or a movie. And, people are characters playing roles. Related to that, I don't know if others noticed this, but it really struck me how, even though we're getting to know this one family and eventually we'll get to know them quite well, here at the beginning, it's not even like the father. Not only do people not have names, but they're not even the father or the girl. It's a father, a girl. What else? Where else does she do it? A man, I wrote down on page 12 and 13. She says a father several times.
Someone, the boys, the mother, the actor. I really felt like that sort of continues the idea of the camera panning, and like there is maybe there's an invitation to shape the way that we're viewing the island, but there's a real sense of neutrality as this camera seems to capture the people, the tourists on the island. And I was trying to figure out like a way to describe this sort of vague, I called it a vague and generic consent that people are doing things at the same time, you know. There's maybe a little bit of description here and there describing the people, but overall you get this sense that they're just a group that are moving together, and without judgment. I didn't feel like there was judgment. She was just describing what she was seeing at the beach. And one of the phrases that I wrote down from page 12 was, what does a father think about when he wakes at dawn on the second morning of vacation, as though all fathers would think the same thing in this situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I also, to this point about neutrality, Nicole, I like that because it's making me think about how it's okay, based on what we know about white people going to the Caribbean, particularly what she, as a vacation spot, particularly, you know, given what Alexis Schaitkin talks about in her author's note at the end about inventing this fictional island and the research that she did. I wonder if what she's trying to kind of turn a mirror on here is like the objectification of the people coming in, right? Because like who tend to objectify the place they're going to. Like they see it as just another white beach that's just another, just another island in the Caribbean, just another white beach that could be like any other white beach. They don't remember the name. They're not going to remember the specific details. And so what I just described, I think you can be described as objectifying. Like that's what a lot of times we as tourists do, is objectify where we're going, particularly in this context. And what she's doing is like objectifying the tourists on the other side, right? It's just another father. It's just another daughter. They're just on another beach. Which I kind of think,
I can't really tell them apart. This one wears flamingos or whatever on his, or dolphins on his swimsuit, but otherwise it's really hard to tell them apart. They're just a group of men, or a group of dads, or
And that's what I think she does a lot of in this book. I like that she's doing that in the opening so explicitly, because ultimately it's like, it's parallel to what she's ultimately doing in the story thematically, which is basically like, and here comes a spoiler for the person who hadn't finished, which is basically turning the narrative of like the innocent white teenage girl victim from America on its head, because like that's the story everyone keeps telling, and then the truth is actually a lot more complicated. So I think that's cool. Okay, catching up on the chat here. I haven't read it in a couple of minutes. Yeah, I like Jen's point about like capturing a bit of the potentially the residents on the island's view of the people who are always coming in. Yeah, all tours looking the same. And then Christina says that neutrality that Nicole speaks about is nicely contrasted with the individual stories of the side characters and between the chapters. Yeah. Like we get those little snippets that are first person. They're all first person. And so they all are extremely personal and subjective, and they have really specific voices and opinions. I like that observation, Christina. Since
what you just said, Mary, about those very specific. Oh
no, go ahead.
Sorry, the delay.
Yeah.
I had just made a note that in that opening, there's also that passivity, like passive voice. A discussion is had. It's like these things are happening, but again, it just feels very non-specific and vague, and which is in contrast to what you were saying, the first person points of view later.
I did not pick up on that. That's fun too. And since this is Craft Talk Book Club, I think it's worth spending a moment to reflect on how it would feel to write in the way we're talking about right now. because I think when I keep using the word bold, it's because when I imagine writing like this, I imagine fraud syndrome kicking in for me, because I would think, who am I to use an indefinite article before like I'm saying a man, a daughter, like that just feels so unconventional. And I think I would question myself, and I think I can see myself editing it to make it a little more conventional, and thinking, well, I don't have a good reason for that. Because I don't know Alexis Schaitkin's process, but I imagine, at least when she was doing a first draft, I'm guessing, if I had to put money on it, I would guess that maybe she didn't intentionally know necessarily, she didn't consciously know necessarily why it was kind of coming out in this way, and she was exploring it. At least that's my writing process. I could be wrong about that, but I guess what I'm taking away, since we always want to be learning from these authors, is that if a story comes out in a particular voice or a particular point of view that feels odd, maybe refrain from judging it right away. Let it do its thing, because there might be something really interesting there for you to discover about whose story this is and how it wants to be told. Have you experienced that, Nicole?
While you were talking, I was thinking about how I was picturing myself as the writer Alexis Schaitkin and thinking, but once I knew what I wanted to do, I would have felt very confident, because it has that feeling of real precision, like real confidence. And she works with that confidence and precision throughout all of it. So, but in my own writing, I've always been a little bit experimental with points of view in writing creative nonfiction and memoir, because there are very good reasons to use different ones. But it can be, I always want to tell people to go in with that sense of curiosity and play, and yes, hold back on judging what, while you're in the process of working. You don't know what it's going to be, and maybe you'll change your mind so that it serves the story better. But just going in with that, there's a reason I'm doing this, and I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I want to find out, why, and then see where it goes.
Yeah. You're so good at that. I think too, you mentioned confidence, and sometimes when I talk with writers who are struggling with the beginnings of their books, their novels or memoirs, but usually novels, I'll say, try not to sweat it, because the odds are you're going to come back and rewrite the beginning anyway once you've finished, because by the end of the draft, you have so much more clarity about what the story is. And this is the kind of beginning that to me reads with that kind of confidence of someone who has figured out exactly what this story is and what perspectives she really wants to get in there. And this is the kind of beginning, again, putting myself in Alexis's shoes, I could see myself rewriting this beginning in this really confident, authorial, voice, by directing the reader. I also think directing addressing the reader is so fun. I love when authors do it. I very rarely, I think, see new writers do it. And I think we should all do it more often because it's so fun. It's so fun as a reader to be addressed by the person writing. I always enjoy it.
What a way to really invite the person in. And I think this is actually the thing that I want to take away from this book is there's an immersion in a world. She does such a good job of immersing us right in the beginning, spending the time to create a context for this place that becomes so important to this family story, and a story that has reverberations, even internationally, to the very personal, to strangers who are writing subreddit threads and creating movies, and it's part of the media. And it's just, it makes so
Right.
much sense having read it that she's took the time to do that at the very beginning. And that's something that I would like to do with my stories, is really create a world, like come in close and then take the story where it needs to go and then gently edge out again.
Yeah. That's so good. I love that. I think this is, if you were to make and I've never actually done this, but I think it's a good idea to make some kind of index or catalog of like the books that we've read that are great references when we want a resource for how to do something well. This would be, for me, a great novel to what you're saying, Nicole, for as an example of like creating a world as character and not a fantastical world. I mean, even though it's not a fictional island, it's a realistic novel and meant to be a realistic depiction of a Caribbean island. So while I think a lot of times fantasy or sci-fi authors devote a lot of times a lot of space and time to creating a world, this is a great example of that being done in realistic fiction. And I agree. I think she really nails that. Okay, so just looking at catching up on some of the chats here.
I love what Anna said about each scene was always told from the view of the person who had the most to learn. That is such a great observation.
Ooh.
And how engaging is that?
Oh,
amazing.
That's okay. Anna, go write that down. That is great. I feel like that's the kind of thing that could carry you through an entire draft. If you decided you were going to write every scene from the point of view of the person who had the most to learn.
That's
like
brilliant.
Talk about rich. That's lovely. Christina, I would love to know how long she worked on this book. I watched a couple of interviews with her and I can't remember what she said. I think several years. It is her first novel. But I don't know how many years. Yeah, I wondered why Amanda says, I wonder why she didn't include point of views from the father or mother. The father in fact, is largely absent after the beginning. Why do you think she didn't include their perspectives? That is interesting, especially, that's a good question to ask, especially because, and it might be interesting to think about all the perspectives we do get, like the one that kind of struck me and stuck with me for some reason is the actress who played Allison in the made-for-TV movie. I think her name is Serena. We get her perspective. Remember, she played Allison in the made-for-TV movie, and she didn't want to say the one line, and she told the director that, and the director punished her by making her do this horrific scene over and over again. It's like that was a very painful, I think, scene for me to read, which is why I think maybe it stuck with me. But I thought it was really interesting to like for her to take us out of the story, really, because I think most of the perspectives, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like all the other perspectives were people who were actually attached to the event itself. Like either they were there on the island, like the mother of Clyde's children who married Edwin, or the actor's girlfriend who was on that. Like everybody was there and connected in some way, except Serena, who just played the character. And so we get that perspective, you're right, without actually getting the parents' perspectives. And I wonder if that's
English teacher too. The high school English teacher.
Yeah. The high school English teacher. Yeah. And I think maybe, I think in that sense, like as writers, if we're thinking about choice, like, okay, I'm going to include a bunch of perspectives in this novel. Who do I want to throw in and who am I okay leaving out? This is where like theme, or the way that I think about it and teach it, is like, what is your big question, becomes a really helpful editing tool. Because if the question here has something to do with how the death of an American white teenage girl is perceived by outsiders, by like the media, and people just viewing it from outside, that will influence whose perspectives you want to tell, right? Like maybe the parents aren't that relevant because we know the parents are devastated. We know to them she was a very specific individual. Like, I don't know. I mean, I'm just kind of spitballing. I don't know. But I think
I'm
that
wondering if it has to do with, sorry, it's again the
go.
delays. I wonder if it has to do with the story very much being a recreation of the younger sister, and so the parents are filtered through the sister. She's the one trying to reconstruct things on her own, and so maybe it's with all of the points of view that we already have in this story. Does it make it more muddy or complex to have the parents speaking for themselves, or is it so long in the past now that they don't want to do that anymore? They don't want to be in this active process of trying to recreate the story. They've decided their
Yeah.
daughter is innocent and was murdered, and they've moved and they're trying to move on. And so it's really
Yeah.
from the point of view of the daughter for a reason.
To that point, I wonder if all of those snippet perspectives we get are from people who don't know Claire, right? Like, do any of them know Claire?
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe, I mean, not off at the top of my head, it doesn't, I mean, the high school teacher, no.
Mm-hmm. The boyfriend.
Clyde's girlfriend, no. The boyfriend, no. Right. So it's like all these different perspectives from, but her parents, we see their reactions through her because she's given so much space.
Mm-hmm.
Emily says, I wonder if we don't get their perspective so much because they seem so separate from Emily, like they're good and loving, but with no depth in their relationship with their remaining daughter. That's great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's definitely right. That's pretty clearly there, like how distant she feels from them now. And maybe, yeah, I see Amanda's point. Like maybe they would be, it would be like the grieving parents are predictable in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'd like to now turn the conversation a little bit to this question of how Alexis Schaitkin kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, like writes the other, writes a character and characters who are not like her. Because right now there's a lot of conversation about that in writing and publishing, how we do that well, who's allowed to tell whose stories, how do we do that effectively and respectfully and accurately. And Alexis in this novel, while much of it is from Claire's perspective, a good portion of it is largely from Clyde's perspective. And a lot of that is third person, but still pretty closely his perspective, even though it's third person. And then at the very end, we get a bit of Clyde in first person, even when he's telling Claire his version or he's telling Claire what happened, right? In first person. When I say version, not because I'm saying he's lying, but because like it's first person. So it's literally him telling Claire what happened that night. And, I'm curious, if people have thoughts about that. Like, did Claire, I mean, not Claire, what's her name? Alexis. Did Alexis effectively capture Clyde for you? Did, the way that she wrote about this, even though it's fictional, this Caribbean island and the people on it, did that feel authentic? Just general reactions to that, I would love to hear. Maybe while we're waiting, do you want to react, Nicole?
Sure. Without ever having spent time in the Caribbean and not being able to, confirm whether she really got the speech of the locals, I felt like I trusted her because it felt like such a well-researched book that I trusted that she did her homework. And I really felt too that she wrote with love and wrote difference in the characters, giving them their full humanity. She really created a full life for Clive. He wasn't this small character that felt like he was kind of moving through the scene and was just like there were shortcuts taken with trying to craft a not important character. I felt like she really devoted herself to creating a full character.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what you think, Mary. Did you feel like you could that you felt good about the construction of these characters that were different?
Yeah, I felt that Clive was a very rich character, and I just realized I'd been calling him Clyde. I don't know if anyone noticed that. It's been a few weeks since I read this book. Thank you. Someone mentioned him that his name is Clive. Thank you. I felt like Clive was very richly developed. And I think, there are a lot of resources out there now for writers on writing characters with different backgrounds than you. And one of them that's often cited is this great essay by Alexander Chee. It's a very short read. The novelist Alexander Chee has a short essay in Vulture. And if you Google like Alexander Chee, 3 questions to ask, writing the other or something, it'll come up. But he has these 3 questions that he basically is like, I always get this question. I'm kind of tired of getting this question. Here are 3 questions you should ask if you're thinking about writing a character who is not like you. And there's something he says at the end of that essay that every time I read the essay, it really is my biggest takeaway from it. And it's something I think Alexis does in this novel. Let me grab the quote. Okay. This is what Alexander Chee says in that essay. He says, these discussions distract me. And so these discussions, meaning discussions about who can write characters unlike them and how to do it well, like that sort of thing. These discussions, he says, distract me increasingly from the conversations I'm interested in. If I'm helping students cross boundaries, I urge them to look at the ones they find within. I also urge them to set them for themselves. I'm more interested in how there's another literature possible when people who belong to the status quo challenge it from within. I'm thinking of Jess Rowe's novel, Your Face in Mine, a story that explores taking on an identity you weren't born into, literally, when the narrator discovers a white Jewish friend from high school has had surgery to turn himself Black. Rowe, who is white and Jewish, pursues the peculiar turns that are possible when someone with white privilege seeks to rid himself of his guilt. Not through restorative justice, but through camouflage and counterfeit. Okay, so I know that was kind of a long, fairly profound quote, but I think what I take away from that is I think what he's saying is he's interested in when people who, like this phrase, when people who belong to the status quo challenge it from within. And I think that's what she's doing here, because ultimately what Allison is out. Yeah, Allison's the one who dies. Ultimately what Allison is doing, and again, about to give you a spoiler if you haven't gotten to the end. Allison is right at the beginning. She's this like I found her to be quite self-aware, like pretty jaded, but like aware of her privilege, aware of these dynamics that she felt like the people around her were not aware of, in a way that you could have easily written off as like college student, obnoxiousness, but that I found to be pretty genuine and sympathetic. Like she's cringing about it. She finds it cringy and she doesn't want to be a part of it. But at the same time, she wants to be special and she thinks she's special. And her way of trying to get out of that cringiness that she's observing, she doesn't want to be a part of it. And so her way of trying to get out of it is to try to be selected as special, right? Like she thinks she's the only girl who's ever hung out with these guys, when we learn like they are hanging out with girls who show up on the island all the time. And ultimately it's her desire to be special, this like perceived specialness, and realizing that she's not, that becomes her demise. I mean, maybe that's an oversimplifying way of putting it, but like, I think it's really what he's kind of getting at in that essay, where he says like, the peculiar turns that are possible with someone with white privilege seeks to rid himself of his guilt, not through restorative justice, but through camouflage and counterfeit. For her, it's not camouflage and counterfeit, but it's needing to be singled out and told that she's special. So really, I think what she's doing is like holding up a mirror to the Allisons and the Claires of the world. And that I think that vibe coming through gives her a lot of liberty with whose perspective she's writing from, frankly. I don't know. Sorry, that was a lot of talking. What do you think, Nicole?
Everything you said. But I was also thinking about her demise had to do with being like any other tourist who wants to have an experience she can take back with her. And that also led to her demise. Mm-hmm. She wasn't really different from the others because she wanted ultimately the same thing.
That reminds me of what you said yesterday or whenever we met to talk about the book, like that theme that kept coming up of everyone and no one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, well, you mentioned,
everyone and
I
no
like
one
what
is
you were saying about that.
Yeah, we get that echo of that idea again and again through the book. I had it written down, page 30, when one of the police officers says maybe we should get a babysitter for Claire. Let me just find it here. And the father reacts and says, if you think we're going to let our daughter out of our sight, if you think we're going to leave her with some person who could be anyone, you're out of your mind. Everyone here could be anyone. You could be anyone. And that gets echoed later through Allison's eyes when she's arriving. We see her, from her point of view, arriving on the island and seeing the chickens and trying to figure out, do they belong to someone or no one? Is this place in the process of being built or unbuilt or rebuilt or none of these? Like, but there's also, I noticed that wording again and again. Someone, and that's what it felt like to me, that in the end, there was really no one to blame and all of us to blame for this system and this way that we, look at female beauty and youth and privilege and all of these things that make her this object of fascination when she dies. All of those forces are at play that also led her to this moment. So
yeah. And I think that brings it back around to that quote we opened with. It seemed, which is on page 334, Claire's perspective. It seems to me now that some truths will never be enough to seal the mysteries that precede them. Like, it almost doesn't matter, right? Like, what the truth is.
I chose for my favorite passage something around the idea of truth too, and its unknowability. Let me just grab it.
Yeah, and while she's doing that, while Nicole's finding that passage, if other people will share, if you pulled a favorite line or passage, just let us know where it is. You could type it or just put the page number and like describe it. I'd love to see what spoke to you.
Found it.
Great.
The diary was a slippery thing, weaving together confession with self-delusion, truth with distortion. No, the weaving metaphor isn't right. That suggests truth and distortion are strands and therefore separable. I think it would be more accurate to say that truth and untruth were present in Allison's diary as hydrogen and oxygen are present in water. The challenge is not one of separation, for what use are either hydrogen or oxygen in understanding the nature of water, but of understanding these moments without trying to separate them. I had to find a way to understand how truth and untruth make each other.
Oh, that's so good. And I think she's such a good writer. And I think that, okay, let me try to make this connection. So to this point that Marion just made in the chat, it was interesting to see Claire/Emily, another truth, untruth, try to recreate Allison's thoughts and then step out and say, am I making her too annoying? Yeah, so there's this place, and I wrote it down. I imagine other people noticed it because it's pretty jarring. It's page 202. We think we're reading Allison. Like, you think suddenly, we're halfway through the novel on 202. We're like, oh my gosh, we finally get Allison's perspective, right? It's like starts being, sorry, hold on. Is it 202? Let me get it. I think it's 200. It's like 200. we start getting Allison's perspective, and we're like, at least when I started reading it, I was like, finally, we get to find out what really happened. And then on page 202, we realize it's Claire being Allison. It's Claire imagining that she is Allison. And I, as I was reading that, I wondered why Alexis was making that choice. But I think to that path, like it's an illustration of that passage you just read, Nicole, because it almost it doesn't matter. Like, is it true? Is it not true? We don't know, and they're connected, and there's sort of this bigger truth behind all of it.
Mm-hmm.
So Carolyn says that was her favorite paragraph too, Nicole. And Britt says she liked this part. Often he paused for long stretches during which I supposed he was reliving unspoken aspects of the story privately. And I understood that these gaps were where it all resided, that my challenge was to parse these omissions, to decipher the negative spaces carved out by his stories. Oh, that is so good.
That's great.
That's so good. And isn't that really like, that feels familiar to me as an experience of listening to someone tell a story, right? What like trying to read between the lines to truly try to piece together what the truth is from what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Wendy says the one about everyone having a life that starts at a certain unalterable point to be happy / sad / traumatic. Oh, where is that? Do you know? Do you remember? I want to find it. Robin says the Caribbean folklore about the goat with the backward hooves. Oh, is it? That's cool. It's a current that runs through many novels. That's great. Cool. Okay, let me just see if there's anything else we wanted to mention. The last thing I just wanted to mention that Nicole and I thought was kind of fun, and this was Nicole's observation. Nicole wondered if everyone in this novel was hiding something, right? If we think about, I think if you kind of think through every character, you'll realize they're hiding something, even if it's small. Mm-hmm. Even the high school teacher is hiding his feelings about, who Allison was. The mom Claire is hiding
her parents what she knew.
Yeah, and you mean that Allison came in before she went back out?
She was sneaking out every night. She was the only one who knew she was sneaking out every night, and that would have been interesting information for the parents and the police for sure.
Yeah. And specifically that she came back in that night of her murder, which we find, or her death, not her murder, which we find out that near the end of the book, like that she came in one last time, and Claire has this regret because she wishes she had said, don't go, but she never told anyone that happened because she felt it would like make her culpable in some way. And that's craft wise, it can be so powerful to ask yourself, what is this character's secret? And you can ask it for any character. What is this character's secret? And like, even if it never comes out, even if you don't tell the reader what it is, you just knowing what the secret is, I think it can add like a lot of energy to how you write that character, because we all have secrets.
I love that.
Amanda said, did people like the ending? What went on between Clive and Edwin? I think like is an interesting verb to use there, Amanda, because I don't know that it matters. Do you mean, did it seem believable, or do you mean, because I found it to be surprising in a way that I credited Alexis's writing for. It was that kind of, I didn't see it coming. And I think that's exactly what she wanted, was for me not to see it coming. But it's that kind of not see it coming where when it happens, it's like, oh, okay, well, this was the real thing that was kind of going on that I just was missing. And that's good writing, right? When you can like pull off a kind of a surprise that feels inevitable. Go ahead, Nicole.
Did we ever get inside Edwin's head? Is he like the only one we don't know what his secret might be?
Oh.
Because we wouldn't know from Clive's point of view that might have happened, because it was Edwin who initiated it.
Right, right.
So maybe that was
I don't
where
think
that
we ever
secret
got
was.
Edwin's point of view. Yeah, the blonde boy, was the blonde boy resolved? Yeah, no one told the truth. Yeah. I don't know that we ever found out, because I think the blonde boy was the last person she actually saw, right? We right about that? I might be wrong.
I think so, yeah.
Unless it was Claire, because she came in and then went back out. Britt says, I also loved this quote, but their relief was a thin skin covering the flesh of longing. Oof, that's so good, Britt. Oh my gosh, it gives me chills. Yeah, Anna and Amanda, I also didn't see it coming, but to me, it felt like, of course I didn't see it coming, because neither did Allison, because they were the fat one and the skinny one. And like, and I think it's that thing where she makes the reader, like, how do I say this? Like, as the reader, she's trying to point out how like they're not accessible to us. Like, they're also the fat one and the skinny one to us, right? And like, they are people who have desires they're not sharing with us. I don't know. At least that's how I was thinking about it.
It feels like another echo of that whole theme around the unknowableness in reconstructing the truth. There's just so much we can't know. There's gaps that we're not privy to.
Yeah. And then they surface and it has nothing to do with us. That's kind of a fun way to think about that too. Like, maybe by being so shocked by that, we feel a little bit like Allison did, left out. Like, it's like, I didn't know this was coming. Aren't I special? Why didn't you tell me this was coming? Like, this has nothing to do with me. It's just between these two men. I don't know. I think it's interesting to think about how the feelings of the reader could potentially like mirror what's going on for Allison in that moment.
Also, we know that they are hanging out with girls every week. Like, if you retroactively go back, you can see, well, maybe they're bored. Like, maybe, yeah. I think there's different ways of backtracking and seeing how this could have been an inevitability. Maybe, I don't know, because we don't know much about Edwin, but
yeah.
Idea of being special and being disappointed and thinking it's about her when really there's other factors.
It would be I don't know if anyone read it twice. I'm guessing not. I haven't, but I'm curious if we read it again, if we would see clues, like now that you know it's coming. That would be an interesting exercise if anyone liked it enough to do that. Okay, well, we should wrap up. But I just want to give a quick plug, if that's okay.
Please do.
For a training, Nicole, would you mind putting these links in the chat? They're at the bottom of our document.
Oh, yeah.
Because for some reason I can't chat. I think just because I'm a guest in the meeting. So Palm Beach is coming out in a couple of months, in 2 months. And if you pre-order it, I'm doing a private free training, just for like workshop, just for people who pre-order the book, on what it's like to work with an editor. Because when I turned in my first draft of Privilege, not Privilege, Palm Beach, my editor asked me to write it from to basically give it a different protagonist, to write it from a different perspective, which is a huge note. And I just thought that could be a really cool conversation to have about, like, how do you do that? And just more generally, how do you take an editor's notes? A lot of times people ask me, do you have to take an editor's notes? Like, when can you push back? So we'll get into all of that, and it'll happen in July. If you can't make it, there will be a replay, but the only way you get there is by pre-ordering the book. So please do pre-order it. And then Nicole is putting in the link to the You can just copy and paste to the registration page, like with, you just upload your receipt and you're in, and we will send you details. Marian asked, how is this book marketed? Literary fiction, meaning Saint X, literary fiction, upmarket, thriller book club. I think it's like upmarket and literary fiction, maybe like literary thriller. Like it's sort of a genre crossing, I think, book, but definitely as literary and upmarket. When people say upmarket, they mean like it has high selling potential. So it's commercial, but it also it's literary in the sense that it's like very well written and it has some like bigger ideas at the heart of it, rather than, it's not just a detective story or just a thriller. Thank you for the question. Britt says, I want to order. Where's the best place to order to help you out? Any like indie bound is great because you can get it from like bookstores, or any bookstore that's not Amazon is ideal. I mean, I'd love for you to order it from anywhere, but anywhere that's not Amazon is always going to be best for us, for the writer. So that would be amazing. And yeah, I think it'll be a great workshop. So I hope you pre-order and join us. And next month's book, Nicole, what is next month's book? Which is this month,
right here,
because we're meeting in 3 weeks.
Yes. Between Two Kingdoms, a memoir of a life interrupted. I just finished it, and I'm excited to talk about it with everyone towards the end of the month. I think we're going to do it June 25th.
Me too. Yeah, June 25th. So you have 3 weeks to read that one. Because we were both taking a little time off last month, so we had to meet today instead of in May. But hope to see you all June 25th.
Yeah,
thanks for being here,
for joining us, everyone, and all the great dialogue in the chat. It's so fun to do this with you. Thanks for being with us,
and thanks for being so engaged. Have a great weekend. Bye.